Please.
Hello, everyone. Nice to be back.
Hey, mate.
Good morning.
Good morning. When we originally scheduled this shia, I didn't know that there would be a coil campaign today, a fundraising campaign. So it's a bit of a busy day.
Sorry, yeah.
No, it's all right. But I could put in a fundraising pitch and say that to make it worthwhile, the gentleman should give a donation to the koilel. Anyway, all right. Let's continue learning about Boira. Let's do one more session about Boira, and then the next time I think we'll move on to the next Melacha. We're talking about the laws of Boira, of separating, if you recall. We spoke about the necessity for 3 conditions at any given time. You always need to have 3 conditions. Condition number 1, thank you. Condition number 1 is that you have to separate always, in order to make it permissible, you have to separate the good from the bad. Not the bad from the good. The good needs to be taken from the bad. Condition number 2 is that you need to separate the food. The separation needs to be done close to the time of eating. And condition, in other words, not for later on, not for another meal. We'll talk about that soon. And condition number 3 is that it needs to be separated manually by hand and not with the use of an instrument. So last time we learned together, we spoke about all different.
No.
Last time we learned together, we spoke about different instruments, about obviously classic instruments for sifting, for sorting, like a sieve is a classic instrument. We also spoke about instruments such as tools, such as spoons, and so on and so forth. So a knife, yeah, we spoke about that last time. We spoke about a peeler, a cutting. We spoke about a peeler and the possibility of boira in such in that sense.
Het peeling heel erg op. Is een knife.
Gezicht is
always a little bit of the food in the
peel.
Peel.
And you can eat the peel as well.
Yeah, yeah.
You can eat the peel. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about separating 2 good things from each other. And a knife, normally we see a knife as just an extension of one's hand. So in the case of peels that are edible, an orange you can anyway peel, we spoke about. Either way you can peel an orange, even though you're taking the bad from the good, because otherwise there's no way to eat the orange. But let's focus. And so those are the 3 conditions that are necessary in order to allow boira, in order to allow it's all right. No, you didn't. It's fine.
Okay.
What it does is you have on your camera on these new things, they constantly find the speaker's face. Do you know what I mean? And then then they sort of have this close-up view of my chin as I'm chewing the cake. Do you know what I'm talking about? Do you know what I mean?
Recording.
No, it's not the recording that's a problem.
I forgot.
No, it's not. It's fine. It's fine. It zooms. Look, when you do it, you'll see it zooms in, move around. It zooms in and out. It does this. It's meant to be helpful. It's really, really distracting. It's like constantly like finding your face. And as I move, and I move more than the average person, so I'm like watching. Like it's like if you have epilepsy, then it should be a warning.
Okay, and you want to have it like this. Good now.
We took that setting off. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well done, you pal. Okay, good. So we've got a few different things I want to talk about. First of all, I want to talk about separating something for immediate use, because we've spoken about the different kinds of instruments. Now we need to speak about what constitutes immediate use. When is it called immediate and when is it called not? The Ramah in Shulchan Aruch says that whenever you separate for the meal that you're about to eat, it's called immediate. So what does immediate therefore mean? Immediate doesn't mean immediately. It doesn't mean that you do the separation to eat straight away. It means that you do the separation in order to eat it at the next meal. So if you are on Shabbos morning and the meal ahead of you to prepare is the lunch, Shabbos lunch, and you're going to have to do some separations, of course, with the other conditions still in place, that you don't do the bad from the good. You only do the good from the bad, and neither do you separate the with an instrument. But if you're preparing the food for Shabbos lunch, then you can eat the food, then you can do that act of separation, which isn't separation because you've got the other two conditions for immediate use. But if it's the morning and you want to prepare for the afternoon, let's say to eat later in the day, then you can't do it. Or if it's the evening and you want to prepare for Shabbos morning, you can't do it. In the various halachic authorities, it's not entirely clear what the time frame of immediate is. There are different opinions. The Magen Avraham, in a different simon, the Magen Avraham wants to suggest that it needs to be, if, for example, if one is doing separation on Shabbos morning, then for the lunch, for Shabbos lunch, then one should only start preparing the meal and preparing isn't the problem, but doing the separation Somuch lesoda, close to the meal, which he says means at the time when people leave shul. See, he gives this expression, this definition. He says when shul finishes, for argument's sake, shul finishes at 11 o'clock, or in our case a bit later, but 11:30, and one might eat lunch an hour later. So if one has to do an act of separation, obviously, as we said, the permissible act of separation, then a time frame in which to do it is approximately that last hour.
Doesn't come with to shul.
Yeah.
That's exactly the point.
Yeah.
Even if the wife doesn't come with the act of separation for the next meal is only considered for immediate use if it's that close to the time when the food is going to be eaten. In other words, it doesn't matter who's doing it. It's an example. It's a paradise, a reference, rather than being a actual reality. It's a reference of time. What's the reference of time, which is called for immediate use? Somewhere like an hour or so before the meal begins. Half an hour before the meal begins. Earlier than that is not called for immediate use. That's how the Magen Avraham, that's what the Magen Avraham takes on. There are other opinions. There are opinions that that whatever the usual amount of time that's needed, and it's not necessarily a contradictory opinion, but whatever the usual amount of time that's needed to prepare this thing for the next meal. So I'll give you a common example that you may never have even thought of. If a person has food in the freezer, the freezer, and let's say, for argument's sake, there's a challah in the freezer. Now, in the chest in the freezer, when you open one of those drawers, there could be many things jumbled one on top of each other. According to halacha, that would be considered a mixture. It's a mixture of all different things. There's some challah and there's some cake in there, and there might be some kugels, or I don't know, what have you not in the freezer. And there might be some ice creams. There might be all different things mixed up in this cabinet, in this drawer in the freezer. Now, in order to get to the let's call it the challah that you need to remove, in order to get to the challah, you're going to have to separate the mixture. Now, if you have, and this is a big case, it's a big question because it's broader than just our little discussion. It goes back to some things we've spoken about in the past. If you have, for argument's sake, the challah that you want, and on top of the challah are various items, a kugel and an ice cream or whatever, if the only way to get to the challah is by removing the top items, then we have a huge problem, because we've established that one can't separate bad from good. And bad, we've said on a number of occasions, actually means not intrinsically bad, not objectively bad, but the thing that you don't want from the thing that you do want. And so if you take the ice cream and the kugel from on top of the challah, then we would ask the question, why is that not a separation of bad, what you don't want, from what you do want?
The cupboard, if you have the hagelslag behind the pindakaas, and you can take.
And that's a very good question, and will remind me, and I'll get back to it, because we're going to differentiate between different kinds of mixtures. But remind me, wonderful. So you have the things on top, and they're not what you want. So is that called taking bad from good? The answer is, for various reasons, I'll give you one. The answer is no, because remember we spoke about the orange and the orange peel? Anything that covers something else, that you can't get to the thing without removing the thing on top, might not be called separating bad from good, because that's the way to get there. You cannot get the good if you don't go through the bad. But let's say you could, without any issues, you can reach in and grab the challah and pull the challah out. So you don't have any issues of taking bad from good. You're taking the good from the bad, and you're doing it by hand. So that's the second condition. But the third condition is that it has to be immediate, for immediate use. Now this challah is frozen, and it's going to take several hours to defrost. By definition, or 2 hours, let's say an hour, 2, by definition, you will only take the challah out earlier than the time frame that we just said. You wouldn't normally take the challah out the freezer when you come home from shul on Shabbos morning.
You can't eat it.
You can't eat it. You might take it out much before that. And so we just established that the challah has to be taken out, that the separation has to be done, the act of separation has to be done somuch l'seuda, which means close to the time of eating. And close to the time of eating, we said, strictly speaking, would mean the time when you leave shul approximately to go home. If that's the time frame, then how are we going to take the challah out the freezer and allow it to defrost in time for the meal? So the answer is that actually it's a reference point. This example that we said before, that my dear friend asked about the hour before the meal, is a reference point rather than being an exact time, an exact location time. The reference point means whatever is normal, a normal time to do that activity, to begin preparing this particular act for the next meal in front of you. Whatever's normal. And so in the case of making a salad, and in the interest of making a salad, you might have to do a little bit of separation. In the case of making a salad, the time for making the salad would be in the last hour or so.
You can do it before you can to eat. After shul.
You could do it after shul, and therefore the halacha requires you not to do it 3 hours before in the morning.
That you can do after shul.
That you can do after shul, but taking the challah out the freezer, which the time to do that for the next meal is 2 or 3 hours ahead of before the next meal. So that would be the appropriate time to take the challah out the freezer. Therefore, that's the moment that you can do that act of separation. At that moment, which is 2-3 hours before you're going to eat it. However, and that's the caveat, however, some of the authorities say that you can't do it the night before.
Why not?
Because the night before is not the necessary time to prepare the challah for the next lunch meal. If for argument's sake you're going to eat, 1 second, if for argument's sake you're going to eat at 12 o'clock lunchtime on Shabbos morning, then you want, for convenience purposes, you want to take the challah out the night before, but you don't need to take the challah out the night before. You can take it out the next day. And so again, if taking the challah out does not require any act of separation, we're not talking about the laws of preparation here, okay? Let's make that clear. There is something called hachana that you can't prepare, but you're allowed to prepare from Friday night to Shabbos day. That's no problem. You can't prepare on Shabbos for after Shabbos. Any act of preparation, even if it's not on Melacha. You can't prepare something that you can't take food out the freezer on Shabbos day for the use for Motzah Shabbos. That you can't do. But we're not talking about preparation here. We're talking about boira, separation. Preparation isn't our discussion. So in terms of the laws of preparation, you can prepare on Friday night for Shabbos day because it's all part of Shabbos. That means if the challah is in the freezer and it's sitting on top of the pile, of course you can take it out on Friday night beforehand. Of course you can, because you're not doing an act of separation. You're just doing an act of taking something out the freezer.
Now we talk about electricity and freezer. What about before?
Yeah.
In which instance?
Before we had this freezer. Maybe.
Before we had freezers.
Okay.
The freezer is a modern example.
Yeah.
It's a classic example of when you might have a reason to do an act of separation. You might have a reason to do an act of separation several hours before a meal, because the food in the freezer is frozen, so you want to take out several hours before. And at the same time, you still need to be aware that the act of separation can only be done close to the meal, as close as we would normally deem normative and necessary. But to do it the night before, just because it's convenient for you, is not, according to many authorities, there's a discussion, but according to many authorities, is not lechachile, is not ideal.
And to put it on a warm or hot place where it's not cooking. You can take things from the fridge and you put it somewhere where it's 50 degrees or where it's not cooking.
Right.
Okay, take it from the freezer and put it on that.
In terms of the laws of cooking.
It's in a quarter of an hour.
Defrosten.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Defrost.
So you could defrost it, provided that you're not running foul of the laws of cooking. Obviously, it's been fully cooked, and other laws that we'll speak about when we learn the laws of cooking, Bezos Hashem. But just because you could defrost it quicker doesn't mean you have to take it out only 20 minutes before the meal. You can take it out a few hours before the meal on Shabbos morning, because that's a normal time in advance to take out frozen food. The freezer is just an example. In any instance where separation would need to be done several hours before, I'll tell you, for example, where they used to do in the olden days, separation a couple of hours before. Yeah, and that's where we learn this from. It's not a case that's relevant today. The Mishnah Berurah says that today we don't do this. But they used to begin preparing the meal after Yom Kippur, the Motzei Yom Kippur meal. They would begin preparing the meal on Yom Kippur. Now, technically speaking,
On Yom Kippur.
on Yom Kippur, and we're not talking about cooking. We're not talking about cooking. We can't be talking about doing any melacha, min haTorah, of course not, because you can't do melacha. But technically speaking, to prepare for after Yom Kippur, on Yom Kippur, even if the action is not a melacha, but merely preparation, for example, to start laying the table, to set the table is not forbidden in terms of the laws of Shabbos or Yom Tov Yom Kippur, but you cannot set the table on Shabbos for a meal that you're going to have after Shabbos. That is called preparation. It's forbidden to prepare from Shabbos to the next day. So on Yom Kippur, you shouldn't be allowed to make a salad for Motzei Yom Kippur. Suppose that after Yom Kippur you want to have a salad. Yeah, you want to eat a salad. So you take the vegetables out the fridge. That's nothing wrong with that in terms of the laws of Yom Kippur. And you start to chop the vegetables. That's nothing wrong with that in terms of the laws of Yom Kippur. But you're doing an act of preparation for after Yom Kippur. Now, normally we would say you cannot do that. You can't prepare rabbinically. It's not forbidden min haTorah. It's rabbinically forbidden to prepare on Shabbos or Yom Tov for the next day. But on Yom Kippur, the rabbis, Chazal, allowed it from mincha time and onwards, because it is difficult to fast. And the rabbis understood that there's this expression in the Gemara that says, we cannot compare, einoi doima, it's not comparable, misha yeshloi pas b'saloi, someone who has bread in his basket, lemisha einloi pas b'saloi, someone who doesn't have bread in his basket. What does that mean? It's a parable to moshel. It means if a person doesn't have food, a poor man doesn't have food, and he knows that tonight he's going to have a meal, it's easier for him to get through the day than the man who has no food and doesn't know what he's going to eat later. It's psychological. It's psychologically easier to fast when one knows that at least at the end of the fast, one will have, Be'ez Hashem, one will have a nice meal. But somebody who doesn't know where the next meal's coming from finds it more challenging. And besides for the regular challenge, of course, of fasting on Yom Kippur. But so the halacha spoke about doing various activities of preparation.
Ja, is ook psychisch. Some 1 hour before Nila, before Yom Kippur finishes, you feel your stomach. But once it's stopped,
You don't have to eat.
You drive some people at home who have not, and you start. You eat 1.5 hour after Mari, and then you don't feel.
Incredible. It's incredible. Someone once said,
I have only the problem after Kol Neder, Yom Kippur not.
Yeah,
After Kol Neder, I don't now like to have coffee or tea.
someone once said it's the biggest proof that the Torah is authentic and divine, is that just because the Torah says you can't have something, you have this crazy desire to have it. And the moment you can have it, you don't want it anymore. It's just supernatural. It doesn't make any sense. A lot of things are like that. Chazal have an expression. It's based on a pasuk, Mayim genuvim yimtoku, which means stolen water is sweeter. Stolen water tastes better. People often desire what other people have more than what they have themselves because they don't have it. They want someone else's thing. In English, we say the grass is green on the other side. They always want what someone else has. They want what they're not allowed to have. What you're allowed to have, you don't really care for. You're not allowed to have, you want. It's one of the psychological challenges of life is to be able to see through that mirage, that it's a smoke screen, it's fake. We should be able to see through it and understand that actually whatever we need to have, whatever Hashem wants us to have, we have, and what's allowed is good, and what's not allowed isn't good. The final of the Aseres Adibros of the Tin Chabodon is loisachmoid, not to be jealous of someone else's thing. Ibn Ezra on the Torah, the commentator Ibn Ezra, he says, how could a God have ever commanded that people can't be jealous? Jealousy is not an action, it's a feeling, it's an instinct. And he answers and he says, fools ask such a thing. Only a fool thinks like that. Ibn Ezra says, forgive me if anyone thought like that. Ibn Ezra said it. He says, a fool thinks like that. Because in reality, we do have control over the way we think. We can program ourselves to think differently. We can program our response systems. Anybody who's gone to therapy, for example, for addiction, is taught ways in which he overrides feelings inside him and changes the way he looks at the world. That instead of looking at the alcohol bottle and constantly craving it, he learns to hate the alcohol, to not want it, to not desire it. And if a person is truly happy with what he has, if everything he has, he's so grateful to God that this is what he has, then he doesn't start looking, and he's happy for other people's success, then he isn't jealous anymore. And it's something that one can work on. One can develop self-control, a way of thinking. It doesn't mean that the thought doesn't come into our head, but it means that the thought is immediately overridden. It's immediately overpowered by the other parts of our mind, the thinking, the logical parts of our mind, which say, no, this isn't meant for you. Be happy for someone else. It is possible. It's like saying, can a person teach oneself to be happy? Of course one can. Of course one can work on being happy. One can be mindful of being happy. People could go through terrible circumstances, God forbid, and they can train themselves to see positive, to see the good. We can, Ibn Ezra says, only a fool thinks that we have no control over our mind. We know that we have control over our minds, and it's a process, it's training. We need to train ourselves how to think. We need to train ourselves to react differently to circumstances, not to get triggered by things. When we see our friends, this is, the example I'm about to give is probably more relevant at my age than for my dear esteemed colleagues here. But if when we see someone driving a Ferrari, you people, you don't care so much for Ferraris anymore. You've got past that probably, But when young people see someone else driving a Ferrari, they want the Ferrari. They want the Lamborghini. They have to train themselves to know that they're happy for him, and that's not what's going to make them happy at all. Well, everything they have is enough for what they need. It's a challenge. Rav Wolbe says, Rav Shlomo Wolbe was a big Musa thinker in the past half a century, and Rav Shlomo Wolbe says that as a person gets older, then his desires or his jealousies change, and they become more spiritual, or more, you could say, more metaphysical and less material. So young people crave materialistic things. They want cars and money and holidays. And older people, they're because they've experienced life, they're more satisfied with material things. Material things lose the attraction. Older people turn to younger people and say, believe me, we've gone through life. It won't make you happier. Older people can speak from experience. But Rav Wolbe says that older people, because as they develop through their life, they naturally, even without working on themselves immensely, but certainly all the more so when they work on themselves, they naturally become more in tune to what's real, what life really is all about, real purpose, meaning. I'm not running, constantly chasing, but real, and that's why Chazalik used this expression. They said when young people try to build, I'm incriminating myself now, but they said when young people try to build, it often is just destruction because they're so impulsive and there's so much lack of thought sometimes that it's just destruction. And when older people destroy, it's often constructive, it's building. So it's a binyan na'orim stira. The building of young people is demolition, is destructive. Stiras zakenim, and the demolition of older people is binyan, is constructive. As a person sees life with different eyes. That's why I always, Torah in the last few parashas always emphasizes that Moshe Rabbeinu always gathered the elders, the zakenim, the elders who had been through experiences, who'd seen things, who had the foresight and the wisdom to understand what's best. Zokain, the rabbis say Zokain, an elder person, is an abbreviation. Zayin Kuf Nun is an abbreviation for the words Zeh Kona Chochma. This one acquired wisdom. Okay, so I said some nice things to you gentlemen today.
I remember my school days now, in the 70s, this country was more leftish than it is today, and so were most of the people in my school class. And I remember one person saying, als je jong bent, en je bent niet links, you're not a leftist,
Yeah.
you don't have a heart. En als je oud bent, en je bent
I'm not right.
je geen hoofd, because you don't
You'll
have
have a
a heart,
head.
because when you're young, but the thing is, you decide about my sister will tell you, you decide about other people's income, they should pay more taxes, and you could have more benefits. On the other hand, if you're older, you could say then you start working, you make money, and you need the money, you want lower taxes. But the thing is, and it's funny, my sister was like that. When she became a doctor, she made, I'm not going to pay taxes. This is crazy. But when she had no money, she said, okay, everything should be free.
But it's still the same trend today in the youth today. The youth in the Western world especially are aggressively liberal and left-wing, progressively, with the wokeism and everything. And I mean, if you ask my personal, non-rabbinic, just personal opinion, what's happened in the Western world is that higher education, university education, is obviously is for many years, for decades, for a couple of hundred years already in Europe, is very much a kind of the pride of our society, that people can study for many years and study at length and develop their minds. But what happens actually is on the ground is that in a lot of cases in higher education, people can go for years in university, years. We're talking about a decade or so. If they're doing their bachelor's, their master's, their PhD, they can go for years. They in the course of their study, they become experts. And I'm talking with respect from experience. I have a master's degree. I know the regimen. I have a master's degree in education. Yeah, and I have an understanding of the work requirement to get a master's degree, a bachelor's and a master's degree. And what often happens is they're focused. In the end, education is like a pyramid. In basis school, you learn a small amount of everything, a foundational level of everything. And then as you go up, you focus until eventually people are writing their PhD, and rightly so.
You can't do one without the other.
You can't do one without the other, exactly. And people end up writing their PhD or whatever it is, or focusing in higher education on a very, very, very precise, specific topic. So they become an expert in something very, very, very specific, very specific. At the same time, they've now gone for many years where they are either being funded by the state or by family members in order to continue studying. They often work very little, just a little bit of a stage or a bit of a side job, but they work very little, contribute very little financially back to the state. And the longer they study, then the less years they produce, they give tax payments back to the state before they eventually retire. So more years that the state supplies them. In those years, most young people in the secular world don't want to get married. They don't want to have a family. And I can tell you because I live on Reimersbeek, they have an extraordinary amount of time to spend going to town and drinking. How do I know? Because I live on the street that when you come down the Beethoven's land, then down Van Lijnberg's land, and then you turn onto Van Boshausenstraat and you go immediately over the Kaferslaan towards the Oulerstede, towards the university buildings. The street, the house that you come past is mine, yours truly, number 1 Reimersbeek. And I can tell you that, especially at the weekends, but even the rest of the week, all times of day and night, 3 o'clock in the morning, there's people on their bikes coming past, drunk, loudly chatting, Friday night, Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, Motzei Shabbos as we call it, and they come past my house. I don't mind the noise, I can sleep through it, but this is everywhere. It's not just in Amsterdam. University students everywhere have an extraordinary amount of time on their hands because they're not got families, they've not got children, they've not got jobs. Studying as hard as it is, they're always late to give in their assignments. There's a lot of procrastination and delay. And what you have is you have a society of people who are, forgive me, but they are spoilt. They're spoilt. A society of youth who have a lot of time to think about what all of us should be doing, what everyone else in the world should be doing, how we all should behave, but far less actual input to society and practical input, having a family, looking after children, having a job from 9 to 5. I studied, and I don't say this in my own credit, I studied my master's degree whilst I was doing smicha in Israel when I was already married with a child. So I was learning full-time in Koilel doing smicha. I did a master's degree in the evenings and on Fridays. It's possible. It's not so. Jewish people at the best of times, we have Shacharis, we have Mincha, we have Mariv, we have Shabbos where we can't work and we have a different focus. We have Yom Tov. It's incomparable. The work output that a Jewish person puts into life, including raising a family, children, grandchildren, Be'ezus Hashem, it's incomparable. It's incomparable to the Western, the average contemporary person in Western society who, so then they end up thinking, sorry, we've gone completely off topic. We're not talking about Boira anymore, but they end up with a lot of time to speculate what society needs best. But sometimes, if they were put to the task and said, you want to make society a better place, just do your bit. Don't worry, you don't need to go protesting every Sunday afternoon in the city centre. It's okay. Society will function without it. Just be a good citizen, pay tax, be honest, be a kind neighbor, be a kind father, bring up the next generation of people with the values you like, whatever those values are. Bring them. This is that?
Dus is de gillik van onderschied.
The chilak?
From onderschied, from difference.
From difference.
Between Jews and...
Yeah.
It is, you don't have.
Right.
We have Shabbos and you don't have.
Well, anyway, we've gone off the topic. We've gone off the topic. All right, we had a little bit of hashkafa there. Okay, so now we were saying about, so in the Yom Kippur example, I still haven't come back to your question yet. I haven't forgotten about you. In the Yom Kippur example, there was this halacha that allowed a person to begin preparing the meal as long as one doesn't do a melacha, but to begin preparing the meal for Yom Kippur, for the end of Yom Kippur, already at mincha time on Yom Kippur, to ease the person to fast. And there was this discussion of what's the Shulchan Aruch says, the Mishnah Berurah says explicitly, the time that people usually prepare their food for the evening meal. So whatever that act of preparation needs to be done, however much time you would need, that's when it's called immediate use. That's what's called immediate use. It happens to be that there's another point to consider, that just because remember that your Shabbos lunch meal, let's assume it starts at 12 o'clock, midday. But it might go on until 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. And you might only eat the salad. When might you eat the salad? Let's say for the main course, in the main course. And you might only eat the salad at 2 o'clock. So does that mean that you can only prepare the salad an hour before that? If we say that the average time to prepare a salad is an hour before you eat it in the last hour, then maybe you should only prepare the salad, again, in the instance that there's boira, that there's a problem of separation. Obviously, if you're just cutting up a vegetable, that's fine. You can do it hours before. But does that mean that you have to prepare in the meal? The answer is no. We look at the meal as being the starting point when you would eat. And the time of preparation, the normal time for preparation, is whenever you would begin to prepare for that meal in a normative circumstance. So let's call it the last hour before the meal. And the reason for that is because it's not normal to start preparing the food for the meal during the meal. And so when the rabbi said it has to be immediate use, they never meant it has to be done just before you're about to eat the thing. That's not what they meant. They meant it shall be done in the run-up, in the period just before the meal will begin, because that's the normal time to eat that, to prepare that food for that meal. Okay?
And what about soda slishes? Well,
The same thing, just an hour or so before Suda Shlishis.
Not after after
No,
lunch.
no.
Okay.
Even if you want to have a shluv. But again, it's only if there's a problem of separation. When you take, if it's Suda Shlishis, for argument's sake, you take some food out the fridge, you're probably not doing any separation when you take food out the fridge because there's no mixture. Separation is defined by a mixture. There first has to be a mixture and then the separation. So when we speak about, your question was...
Prepare the table after...
Preparation, not separation. Preparation can be done anytime on Shabbos for Shabbos. That's no problem.
No. After Kiddush, after meal, or in shul, after Kiddush.
No problem.
No problem.
But you're not, as long as you're not doing an act of separation.
No, okay.
Whenever you have separation, boira, you always need, we said, 3 conditions. Good from bad, all 3 together. Not one, but all 3. Good from bad, not bad from good. Separating by hand and not with an instrument, and doing it for immediate use. So that means whenever there's a mixture, and you want to, let's say for argument's sake, let's go to the preparing the sort of the meal. You want to lay the table, yeah, let's go to example, very good example. You want to set the table for the Shabbos lunch, or you want to set the table for Suda Shlishis, whatever it is, Suda Shlishit. So now you look in your on the kitchen side, and maybe this is more in my house where sometimes, there's it's busier. So on Friday night, you might do washing up. You wash up the dishes from the Friday evening meal.
If you need it for Shabbos.
If you need it for Shabbos, yeah. If you need it for Shabbos, absolutely. So you wash up the dishes, and even if you might only need 1 dish on Shabbos, anything that you might need, it's normal to use later in Shabbos, you can wash up.
Mm-hmm.
It's not called preparation. In other words, if you're going to use a cup or a dish, whatever, you can wash all of them up because it's not preparation. Okay. But let's talk about separation, boira. So you have a big bunch of knives, forks, and spoons, and you want to wash them up. So you wash them up. Now, we'll talk about how to put them back in the drawer because you've got a big bunch of knives, forks, and spoons. It's a mixture of knives, forks, and spoons. How are you going to sort them in the drawer? Let's say Shabbos morning, you for argument's sake, you want to set the table, and all the cutlery has been put in the drying rack, all the cutlery, and it's all mixed up. It's dry cutlery, it's mixed up. So now you've got a mixture of knives, forks, and spoons, and you need to lay the table. So here we enter into our discussion because you've got a mixture. In order to allow you to separate the mixture, you have to have 3 conditions. One is that you're going to take good from bad, means what you need from what you don't need. That's not so hard. If you need a spoon, you make sure you take a spoon. If you need a fork, you make sure you take a fork, not the other way around. You don't take the knife away to get the spoon. You take the spoon from the... So it's not so hard. You look for the spoon. There's a big bunch. I need 1 more spoon on the table. Here, I take a spoon. That's condition number 1. Is you're taking what you want from what you don't want, not the other way around. Condition number 2 is that you do it by hand. Well, by hand is easy because you're not likely to separate the knives, forks, and spoons with an instrument. Okay? So that one's obvious. Condition number 3, and this is where it's very relevant, is that you have to do it for immediate use. But now you want to lay the table in the morning before you go to shul. Mm-hmm. And if laying the table comes with a question, if there's any question of separation, again, to clarify, that means that we're not talking about preparation. Preparation where there's no separation, just regular preparation. In other words, taking a fork from the cupboard, from the drawer, is permitted 5 hours before the meal, because as long as you're preparing for Shabbos, that's absolutely fine. It's only separation, boira, the act of separation, that requires this condition that it needs to be done for immediate use. And so that means that if you have a mixture of knives, forks, and spoons, and you want to set the table before you go to shul, then you have a problem. Because even if the other two conditions apply, namely that you do it by hand, which you obviously do, and that you do what you want, the good from the bad. In other words, if you want a spoon, you're going to take a spoon from the others. But still, doing it before shul is 3 hours before the meal. And we just said that unless it's something like a challah in a freezer, where you need 3 hours, if you don't need the 3 hour slot, the 3 hour time span to separate, then really you can only start to do it at the normal time when you would prepare in the weekday a meal before you begin the meal, which is in the half an hour before you eat. That's the normal time. And so in such an instance, you cannot then separate the spoons from the forks on Shabbos morning before you go to shul to lay the table, because it's too long before you're going to eat. Do you understand? That's the third ritual. The same as with Suda Shlishis. If in Kal Chasidim, they want to set the table for Suda Shlishis, they want to set the table to after the Kiddush. So we finish the Kiddush and then they clean up and they want to set the table so that when we come back 3-4 hours later, it's set for Suda Shlishis. If there was any act of separation...
That's not correct.
Why not?
Because
I've been challenged.
Too long before.
Objection, Your Honor.
It's because it is too long before the fish.
Correct. So if there's no separation, if the plates,
Then you can do what you
and you
want.
can do what you want, if all the plates are stacked up in the cupboard,
Yes.
as our dear friend Powell's very special daughter arranges the Kal Hasidim kitchen wonderfully with all the various stickers and labels. I've heard that Amstelveen Shul is also very, very in order. With labels and stickers, is that correct? Yeah, I've heard that Amstelveen Shul. I've heard Amstelveen Shul is also very yeckish in the kitchen.
Yes, I think it's okay.
They're okay. So if you go in the cupboard in Kal Hasidim, you'll see that the plates are all stacked up. So you want to put the plates on the table. There's no act of separation. It's not a mixture of two different things. Remember, we said many, many weeks ago that a mixture is only different things. If you have a whole stack of plates, it's not a mixture of plates. It's plates. That's not called a mixture.
People live too far from shul. You should have Suda Shlishis at home. That's time before.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's in the Ober, it's 1 or 2 o'clock, say, bit mincha.
All right. And then you went home for the rest of Shabbos. When I was younger, one of my...
a
little bit younger.
Summertime or wintertime, it's so much since 76, the clock is 1 hour.
Clock's 1 hour.
Late.
Yeah, in the summer.
Yeah, summer.
Most good people also used to live closer by the synagogue.
Yeah.
That made it easier to.
When I was growing up in Manchester, then there was a mincha at 2 o'clock in the shul round the corner from our house. There's a lot of shuls there.
Yeah.
And my father wanted to sort of like have mincha sort of out the way, like sort of, he's done his Shabbos mincha and then you can have a rest, you can eat sort of shlishis afterwards, and you have the rest of the day till Ma'ariv. I think especially in the summer, because it was such a long Shabbos. Or maybe in the winter, whatever it was. And normally he would want to start the Shabbos lunch meal early and be finished by 2 o'clock. But I came from Blianera, from a big family, and everyone, as we were growing up, everyone had their own plans. And on Shabbos morning, one person would daven in shul at 8, and another person would daven at 10, and everyone would wander in at their own times. And my father would be getting a little bit recorded, but a bit aggravated, because he wants to get finished by 2 o'clock. And many weeks, he sort of, in the middle of the meal, he said, "I'm benching, I finished." And he would bench and go off to shul, and we'd say, "All right, we're just carrying on." So he wanted this 2 o'clock minyan. It was very precious for him. It was a very precious minyan. That's my childhood memories. But getting back to the thing, so if preparing the sort of shlishis would involve separation, i.e., if, for example, the knives, forks, and spoons were mixed up and you wanted to put them each by everyone's place, which we don't do anyway in Chassidim, we just put like a little tub in the middle of the tables. But if you if you would want to do that, then you would not be able to do it after the Shabbos morning Kiddush, because it's too early to begin separation for after Shabbos. And again, as I said now a few times, that means even if you have the other conditions, that means even if you do the good from the bad, what you want from what you don't want, and even if you would do you do it by hand, which of course you do, it's obvious, but still it's too early. It's too early. And that's the law of early. The law of immediate needs to be the normal time in the weekday when you would begin preparing a meal, an hour or half an hour before a meal, not more than that, unless it's an item that needs to be done more than that, like challah from the freezer.
But also in the morning, the shuls began at 8 o'clock, Shabbos morning.
Yeah, yeah.
In the
8
past.
o'clock,
In the past,
half
yeah.
past 8. Now, some shuls 9:30.
Don't say anything.
And
Don't say anything.
Afterwards, it's the
Goes on for ages,
from
yeah.
1 hour.
We think, so we move the clock forward, we also move our schedule forward.
Yeah.
So nothing really changes.
But it's interesting. It is interesting. I mean, my father always says this. Maybe you can relate to this. That the younger generation, my generation, in the modern, I call it the internet age. Even before smartphones, the internet age, the ability to work anywhere, in other words, to work anywhere, anytime, made that people's eating and sleeping and daily lifestyle habits change tremendously. So people can have the ability, they have the luxury to get up later and to work till later, or vice versa, to get up earlier and to work to especially in the post-COVID world, to a lot of remote working and all these kind of things. And it means that today, if in a big community, if you go to the bigger community, London, Manchester, New York, anywhere where these big shuls, where they have regular minyanim for Shacharis in the weekday, the first thing you notice is that there's people davening Shacharis in a regular day in the weekday at 9:30 or 10 o'clock. And we're not just talking about people who are unemployed. And we're not just talking about people who don't have jobs. We're talking sometimes about very successful people who have intense jobs. But the whole daily schedule today is people can get up and then and I think it's not ideal, because really, halakhically speaking, the first thing a person should do is daven Shacharis. It should, the first thing, it doesn't mean you can't do anything else, but there's even a halacha that says that a person shouldn't really greet people. He shouldn't just greet people and say hello before he started Shacharis, because it's as if you greet other people before God. And it doesn't mean to be rude to people. It just means a person should get up in the morning. You see that the brachas of the morning are arranged when you get up. Once upon a time, and I think some of the Sfadim still have this custom, they would recite the Birkas HaShachar in line, in sync with their activities. So when they woke up, they would say Moed Anu, etc. They would say then they'd say the next roch, and then when they got dressed, they say Malbish Arumim, who clothes the naked. And there was even this once upon a time, that's how people would actually make the brochas. So you see that the tefillah process would be in line with you getting up in the morning, and then you would go out and say, put tefillin on, say Shema, daven the Shemoneh Esrei, and you've then started the morning, you've woken up the morning, so to speak, with prayer, and then you get on with your day. And today people have the luxury to kind of get up and then they do some things and do some errands and whatever, and then they can chap, we call it in Yiddish, they chap a minyan, they can grab a minyan at 9:30 in the morning. But all these changes that have happened, which may not be so desirable, but these change because people then they go to work at 10 or 10:30 and they have a meeting remotely, and then in the evening they'll finish up on something. It's not 9 till 5. I imagine that you gentlemen worked most of your professional careers from 9 till 5 every day. They don't do that anymore.
Also, we have more different minhagim. If you in winter, if you can say shachit from 7:30 or 7:20, then Jackie should stay with the stopwatch.
Yeah. Yeah.
If now we have in Gerard Douwshoe, we have from the Chabad restaurant, we have many tourists. And then some said they came men with pies, wet pies.
Yeah, from the
11 o'clock.
Yeah.
First they went to the mikveh with the geider.
Yeah. Bij de Bismedrash. Yeah.
And then they come back to Albert Kuipbuurt.
Long walk.
Is that
I don't know, come to Kalchsidim.
Hey, baas.
Is that shachit at 11 o'clock? We are always.
You are finished.
So
I've seen in the weekday, I had horrific. I wouldn't even tell you it.
also from people.
Yeah, it's a different. The Hasidim anyway have a whole different culture of what's the right time to daven and when they daven. It's for us yekkers, and I consider myself a yekker in that regard.
But
Not,
before the war, there was everybody
Ah.
did the same.
Right. I have seen in the base of Medrash where the koilel is. So it's because it's open the whole day. So sometimes people who are flying through have a few hours and they come to the base of Medrash to daven or whatever, and then they go, and often they come in random times of the day where there's no minyan, and they come, they daven in the side. And I've seen people doing shacharis, wait for it, in the afternoon.
And also, it's not.
In the afternoon. I don't know. I'm a rabbi and I don't know. There was once a Hasidic, like sort of Rebbe, like a third division, we call it. You know, in football, there's the Premier League. So it was like a smaller Rebbe with a few of his Hasidim around him. And he came in at 3:00 in the afternoon and said, can they use the shul to make a minyan for Shacharis? And Rabbi Ball, the Rosh Koilel, who himself has a certain Hasidic upbringing, but he's a halacha man. He's in that sense, he didn't grow up with this kind of thing, but he's Hasidic inclined in his attitudes. But Rabbi Ball said, no, you cannot use our shul, and they were shocked because they said this is our holy rabbi or whoever it is. Rabbi Ball said, in this community, we do not daven shacharis in the afternoon. If you want to go downstairs in the basement, you can do whatever you want, but we don't daven shacharis in the afternoon. It's against what we say.
On Yom Kippurim, when you are
Also good.
late with Shachis, and you must not
Late.
then it's too late for Musaf, and then you have to mincha, but you can't do that because
It's the wrong time. Yeah, it's gonna. Yeah. Anyway, you were saying we've got off topic again. All right, very good. So that's over. Next time.
Give him the pindakaas and hagelslag.
Yes, yeah. Let's finish off with that. Good point. Very good. I couldn't remember. It's only, I said this now a few times, the whole discussion begins when there's a mixture.
Yeah.
And to define a mixture is not entirely easy. It's not the easiest thing to define, but a mixture means that things are jumbled together and they lie one on top of each other. When you look at this assortment of cups and coffee and tea and tissues, all of this is not a mixture.
Yeah.
There are various things, items placed in different locations, but it's not a mixture. Because so if I want to get, for example, this cup, if this was the shelf in the cupboard and I want to get this cup over here, I would be allowed to move this out the way to get it, because this isn't mixed together. It's just placed at separate locations, even if they're right next to each other, even if they're all touching each other, but they're at separate locations on the shelf. A mixture is only when things are enveloping each other. They don't need to be totally covering each other. For example, this is a mixture, but good, correct. It's all the same, exactly.
Okay.
This also these would be a mixture. And if there was a different tea over here, then this would be called a mixture. The tea is the various teas together is a mixture. And then there's no good and bad objectively, but we said a few times that it's subjective. If, for example, if this green tea was at the bottom and I wanted this green tea, then the other teas are what I don't want. And so we consider in halacha, as when we use the word bad, it's the wrong word. We mean the thing you don't want from the thing you do want. And so actually taking this off would be taking what I don't want from what I do want. So in the instance...
Is it only for food?
Let's show them.
Also when you need...
items, safer,
or
items as well.
If the safers, this for you are like this and you need the...
Items as well. I'll talk next time about items. We will talk. I want to talk.
If you want a Shabbos, a safer, which is...
We'll talk about items next time,
Yeah.
but if this is called a mixture of things you might want from things you might not want. And there you have to, so in a freezer, that's why I gave the example of a freezer, because things can be jumbled on top of each other, that's where there would be a problem. But in the instance that you mentioned, which is the shelf and the pindakas is at the back of the shelf, it's not called a mixture in the first place. So then you can move things out the way, no problem. Even in this instance, if the green tea is totally covered, then many authorities say it becomes like an orange peel, in the same way that we said you can remove the peel of an orange to get the fruit, because that's the only way to get there. It's normal to take from the top. So the same thing is true. If there's things on top of something else, you can take on top. It's only where, if it was like this, I should, instead of taking this away and getting that, I should get the thing I want from the thing I don't want. That's the difference. Okay. Alrighty then.
Sorry.
Moving the whole and your some getting on the top was first on the bottom.
Yeah, if you move it around, then you have to
No
take the
problem.
thing you want. You take the thing you want and not the thing you don't want.
When it is moving this, then what is under comes up.
Comes upstairs, yes.
Yeah, if you shuffle it around. Yeah, you shuffle it around. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, sorry.
Very good.
Very good.
Everyone, gentlemen.
Uh,
Look after yourselves.
Thank
It's
you.
cold outside. Sorry?
Thank you so much. Thank
My
you.
pleasure. My pleasure.
the first free is 20 of March. Free Nissan.
Wait, my phone is out.
Take the phone. Ding is uitzetten. Even kijken, waar is opname? Stoppen. When you go to Israel?
When am I going to Israel?
Yeah.
Sunday night, Bester